In a tense confrontation, Amber was pressed to reveal what she believed had happened. As the mother with 7 months to reflect on the tragedy, she was challenged not to feign ignorance about the circumstances surrounding Damien's death. Amber could only speculate that perhaps something had been dropped. This case centers on the tragic death of Damien Landry. He was discovered unconscious in his crib. Despite efforts, Damien later succumbed at the hospital. Today's narrative takes a unique approach. Rather than a single voice recounting events, Damien's parents tell their story in their own words. Their complete police interviews are presented here, accompanied by crime scene photographs to illustrate the grim reality of how their son met his fate. Note that these interviews have been heavily redacted, with certain sections omitted to protect sensitive medical details. We begin with Amber's hospital interview, where she was first questioned about the night in question. She recounted the events leading up to discovering Damien's condition. She explained that she had put him to bed around 10 p.m. Later, she woke her 2-year-old daughter and listened to Damien on the baby monitor, noting he had been ill for weeks, so she allowed him to rest. She heard what sounded like giggling or laughing through the monitor. Upon checking, Damien was lying on his stomach, still asleep, but breathing. His breathing was deep and he showed no signs of distress. Amber gently patted his back, even recording his unusual breathing to show the doctor. She planned a doctor's visit that day. After tending to her daughter, Amber noticed 20 minutes had passed without any sound from Damien on the monitor. When she entered the room, she realized it took a moment to comprehend that Damien was no longer breathing. She felt his back rolled him over and shook him. Her frantic attempts to rouse him failed as he remained unresponsive. Lifting Damien, she noticed red fluid pouring from his nose, a harbinger of the dire situation. In desperation, Amber ran to her husband, imploring him to help her, voice filled with panic. Her husband, Scott, was across the house watching TV before the chaos erupted. She urgently informed him that Damien wasn't breathing. Together they laid Damien on the floor and began CPR. Each compression elicited a disturbing brownish-red fluid from Damien's mouth. Amber called 911, stepping outside to get a signal while Scott continued CPR inside. The 911 operator's instructions were redundant, but the couple persisted in their desperate resuscitation efforts. Despite their efforts, fluid continued to flow from Damien's nose and mouth. Paramedics arrived and took over, but the grim scene was already set. Damien had been sleeping in his crib on the far side of the house. The family relied on baby monitors to alert them if he stirred or cried. His attire that night was described in detail. He wore pajamas consisting of long pants and a long-sleeve shirt. The outfit was a typical pajama set accompanied by a diaper. The crib contained stuffed animals, but none were near Damien. They were neatly placed at the crib's edges. His blanket and a pacifier were positioned on opposite sides. Additionally, his comforter lay on the bed. Amber estimated Damien had been without breath for about 20 minutes. The exact time was uncertain, but the realization came in a blur. The frantic nature of the moment delayed the 911 call by a few minutes. Poor cell service forced Amber to step outside repeatedly. She struggled to communicate with emergency operators, her panic palpable. Amber then disclosed Damien's complex medical history. Born prematurely at just 24 weeks, his early birth was caused by his breech position and premature contractions. An emergency C-section saved him but left him vulnerable. During delivery, Damien suffered a grade 4 brain bleed, a severe injury that was quickly managed. He spent 4 months in intensive care at All Children's Hospital. 2 months of intubation followed before he could breathe independently. Upon discharge, he returned home on oxygen delivered through nasal tubes. An apnea monitor accompanied him to track breathing irregularities. Amber confirmed Damien had since been cleared from oxygen therapy by 3 or 4 months old. He continued follow-ups with a pulmonologist. Damien spent a grueling 4 months in All Children's Hospital, confined to intensive care. For roughly 2 months, he remained intubated, tethered to life support, before he began breathing independently. When Damien finally returned home, he still required oxygen. The oxygen was delivered through a nasal tube, never invasive, through his throat. Alongside this, an apnea monitor was in place to oversee his fragile breathing. Questions arose about whether he continued to need oxygen. By 3 or 4 months at home, Damien had been cleared to discontinue oxygen support. He had been weaned off it entirely. Regular follow-ups with a pulmonologist tracked his respiratory progress and overall health, though the strain remained clear. His pediatric care was overseen by Dr. Saperio Spira. She collaborated closely with Dr. Howell and Dr. Liu to manage his complex needs. Damien also consulted a cardiologist who had cleared him last year, with another annual appointment looming. Further specialists included a neurologist, a neurosurgeon, and an optometrist addressing the multifaceted challenges Damien faced. All specialists had cleared him soon after his discharge from the hospital. His mother confirmed that she had kept every medical appointment up to date. She insisted this was the first time he had ever stopped breathing unexpectedly. There had never been any prior episodes. This had come out of nowhere. In the weeks leading up to the incident, he had been receiving breathing treatments. These treatments involved inhaling a mist designed to aid his struggling lungs. When asked about the purpose, it was explained that it was for congestion. The congestion stemmed from complications related to his premature birth. As the weather shifted, fluid would accumulate in his lungs, worsening his respiratory condition. His mother wondered aloud if this might have played a role in the sudden crisis. When pressed about the last time he saw his pediatrician, she responded promptly. It had been just days before earlier that week. Whether Monday, Thursday, or Friday, the appointment was recent, well within the past week. The pediatrician was fully aware of his lung congestion and had advised continuing the breathing treatments. Questions then turned to his nutrition. Did he nurse or take formula? Specifically, what kind of formula was he on? He was fed a peptide-based formula specially designed for premature infants because he could not consume as much as a typical child. This concentrated formula provided the essential nutrition he required. The peptide formula is a variant of Pediasure tailored to his needs. Since he did not tolerate regular Pediasure well, he was given a soy-based version to supply vitamins and minerals. He also ate regular table foods. His meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, were small portions shared with the family. Despite eating, he remained very small for his age. When asked about his last meal, his mother recalled clearly. He had eaten chicken and rice the night before, consuming a portion of it. His bottle was given at 9 o'clock, followed by bedtime. He went to bed around 9 p.m. His mother confirmed this without hesitation. When asked if he slept through the night or woke frequently, she offered a clear answer. He usually slept through the night. Typically, he would wake around 10 in the morning, but on that day she let him sleep longer, knowing he was unwell. While getting the older daughter Angelina ready, she chose to let him rest. This was also the doctor's advice. But 20 minutes later, when she stopped hearing sounds from the monitor, she went to check on him and discovered he was not breathing. Questions turned to his medications. He was on medication only for acid reflux, no other prescriptions. The mother confirmed there were no additional drugs or substances in his system. Absolutely nothing else. Attention then focused on a mysterious red substance present. She was asked if she had fed him recently. It appeared he had not eaten for some time. She speculated the red fluid might have been post-mortem, something that emerges after death, but admitted it was not truly red. Rather, it was closer to a brownish-red hue. She could not identify the substance and noted it did not resemble his formula or any food he had consumed. The boy's mobility was then discussed. He was able to crawl, though not yet walking. Baby gates had been installed to limit his movements. These barriers confined him mostly to the living room area. The kitchen had 2 entrances, both securely blocked, preventing him from wandering beyond the designated safe zone. He was rarely allowed to roam freely. His mother stayed home to care for him and his sister providing the primary structure and learning environment, yet remained baffled by what had transpired. When asked about the 2-year-old's whereabouts during the incident, the answer was straightforward. She was seated in her high chair eating. This was located in the tiled area of the living room. The mother was nearby disposing of some papers when she noticed the silence from the monitor. That was the moment she went to check and found the boy unresponsive. The inquiry then shifted to the medications taken by both parents. Her husband was under treatment from Dr. Roberts in Port Charlotte. He was prescribed medication for injuries sustained during Army service years earlier. When asked about illegal drug use, the mother firmly denied any such activity by either herself or her husband. During the critical moment, her husband was in their bedroom watching television. She reiterated that neither of them used illicit substances. Reports later confirmed the child's condition was stable at that time. Plans were made to transfer him to All Children's Hospital for specialized care. This marked the conclusion of Amber's initial interview with authorities. At that point, the child was still clinging to life, as the mother indicated. The emergency response was immediate. Now the second interview with Amber will be presented, this one occurring after the tragic death of the child. How he died. The answers lie ahead. Next, the investigation turns to an in-depth interview with Scott, the father. At the conclusion, every detail will be laid bare, revealing the full sequence of events, including the final sentencing and punishment. The revelations that follow will be shocking. Prepare yourself. In the course of this case, drug addiction emerges as a central theme. Amber, the mother, is addressed with no intent to insult, but as a stark acknowledgement of the reality they faced. This struggle with substance abuse is a lifelong battle, one that colors every moment of their lives. Professionally familiar with addicts, especially those dependent on opioids. The investigator describes their typical behaviors, setting the stage for assessing Scott's condition. Such individuals often appear perpetually intoxicated, their senses dulled under the constant influence of drugs. Questions arise. Was Scott in such a state during the critical times? The investigation uncovers that Scott was more impaired than Amber, often heavily under the influence, a fact that raises concern about his ability to care for the children. This condition is precisely what is meant by being under the influence. Amber confirms that without his medication, Scott would suffer severe withdrawal symptoms. The critical question remains: was Scott capable of properly feeding, putting the children to bed, and caring for them? Amber insists firmly that if Scott appeared incapacitated, she would never leave him alone with the kids. Her protective instinct was clear. She would never risk the children's safety by trusting Scott in such a state. There were times when Amber was away, notably during Damien's doctor's appointments in St. Petersburg, which she often attended alone due to Scott lacking a driver's license. Scott sometimes accompanied her when possible. Angelina was usually left behind, as it was simpler not to bring her along. The investigators note that Amber appeared more attentive to the children's needs than Scott. Their sources indicated Amber was more engaged in the care of the kids than Scott was. Amber counters this, describing their efforts as equally shared, a 50-50 partnership in parenting duties. She explains they alternated responsibilities, waking with the children on different days. The question arises: what exactly did Scott's share entail? Amber clarifies that Scott's duties mirrored hers, feeding, changing, dressing the children on his assigned days. Their parenting roles alternated smoothly, each taking turns rising with the kids. This routine included all aspects of childcare, from feeding to dressing, reflecting a shared responsibility. The discussion turns to feeding the children specifically. Amber confirms that feeding and changing duties were split equally, and both attended doctor's appointments. Because Amber held a driver's license, she took the lead on transportation, though Scott sometimes accompanied her. This practical aspect left Amber as the primary driver to medical visits. The inquiry shifts to medication administration for the children. Both Amber and Scott shared responsibility for giving prescribed treatments. Damien required nebulizer treatments to be administered 3 to 4 times daily as per medical instructions. This regimen had only recently begun following Damien's onset of a cold the week before his death. The severity of the situation becomes clear as the investigation reveals the children's medications were being misused. Both parents admitted to administering the treatments. This acknowledgement confirms joint involvement. They both held prescriptions for the medications. Amber discloses that her own prescriptions came from Dr. Landry in Tampa. Scott was seeing a doctor in Port Charlotte. The name Dr. Roberts surfaces as the attending physician there. Confirmation is given that Dr. Roberts was involved. The investigation probes whether street purchases of drugs supplemented their prescriptions. Amber insists they had sufficient medication and did not resort to buying drugs illicitly. They kept their medications secured, either locked in a drawer or carried in Amber's purse. Amber would take her medication with her when leaving the house, while Scott's prescriptions remained locked, with Amber retaining the key. The conversation returns to details about the locked storage. The medications were secured in a locked drawer. Clarification is sought on the type of lock used. Amber describes it as a specialized drawer lock, operated by sliding a button. The drawer cannot be opened unless the button is slid and the drawer pulled out. This mechanism prevents accidental or unauthorized opening. A key is required to lock and unlock the drawer before it can be accessed. Amber confirms she alone possessed the key to this drawer. Scott had no access to the keys. This was deliberate, given his history of medication abuse. Amber took on the role of gatekeeper, carefully controlling Scott's access. She limited his intake strictly to what was necessary. In effect, Amber functioned as Scott's nurse to prevent overuse. This control was vital to curb Scott's prior excesses. Both Amber's and Scott's medications remained under lock and key, with Amber holding the authority. She was the sole custodian of the key, administering Scott's doses as needed. No one else had access to the lockbox. The question arises whether Scott could bypass this security. The investigation heard rumors of Scott potentially jimmying the drawer open. Amber denies this possibility, insisting she would have noticed any such attempt. She affirms that while Scott had a history of such behavior, the locked drawer was never compromised. The interviewer presses whether Amber ever observed the drawer tampered with. Amber firmly states she never saw any signs of forced entry. Though Scott had pulled stunts before this drawer remained secure, Given Scott's potential risk, Amber explains why she sometimes carried medications in her purse. She always took her medications with her when leaving the home. Clarification is sought about the presence of oxycodone in Amber's purse on the night in question. Amber cannot recall definitively whether oxycodone was in her purse that night. Thus, it remains possible that she carried that medication with her during that critical time. Amber confessed that whenever she carried money, she kept her purse under her pillow while she slept. This habit persisted even when there was no cash inside. That night, her purse remained exactly where it always was, under her pillow. She confirmed it was never moved from that spot. This detail ruled out any chance that Damien could have accessed her purse. When pressed about Logan, Amber admitted he might have had access, but she doubted he ever rummaged through her belongings. Her hesitation painted a murky picture about who might have been near the purse. The interrogator then shifted focus, cutting through the fog. They confronted Amber about a prior deception, demanding to know why she had lied. Amber admitted her dishonesty stemmed from fear. Fear of losing both her homes, as she was about to see a doctor. They pressed her further, emphasizing how crucial it was to disclose the chaos in her household and Damien's emergency condition. Could she not see how relevant this information was? Amber's response was fragile. She claimed she simply wasn't thinking clearly at the time. Then came the pivotal question: how had Damien come into contact with the harmful substance? Amber hesitated, admitting she needed to reconsider, struggling to find an answer. She voiced her bewilderment repeatedly, a haunting admission of ignorance. As the interrogation intensified, she was asked what she truly believed had happened. Her uncertainty was palpable. She confessed to dwelling on the mystery, daily tormented by its senselessness. "It's just not logical," she seemed to say without words. The investigator, sensing her hesitation, challenged her more directly, suggesting she knew more than she admitted but was unwilling to speak. He painted a scene describing their positions in the room, both watching Damien. Amber was urged to consider how mobile her child truly was. The truth was stark. Damien could neither climb out of his crib nor access the purse. The implication was clear: he could not have found the substance on his own. Amber, as the mother, had been given 7 months to grapple with this reality. 7 months to piece together the puzzle, yet she insisted she had no idea how it happened. The investigator refused to accept this, demanding she not feign ignorance. Amber offered only one possibility. Something had been dropped. She suggested the child might have found a pill accidentally dropped on the floor. This was her sole theory to explain the presence of the drug in Damien's system. Attention turned to Scott, questioning the dosage he was prescribed. The interviewer revealed there was a far greater amount of the substance detected in Damien than Scott's prescription accounted for. Amber was unaware of this discrepancy until then, but the theory remained that Damien had found and ingested a pill left unattended. The timeline was scrutinized next. Damien had been placed in his crib around 9:30 p.m. He was not removed from the crib until 11:30 a.m. the following day. Amber checked on him during that interval and noted his breathing. She even recorded his breaths before fetching her daughter. At first, she thought Damien was simply unwell and chose to let him rest. Only after her daughter finished eating did she attempt to wake him, discovering the grim truths. This stretch accounted for a 14-hour window. The gravity of that time frame was emphasized. Both understood it spanned 14 hours without intervention. If Damien had ingested the substance earlier, the effects would have manifested sooner. His system would have been metabolizing the drug, causing visible complications well before bedtime. Yet Damien was placed in the crib seemingly untroubled. Experts confirmed this sequence was medically impossible. The critical timeline began when Damien was put down at 9:30 p.m. Between then and 11:30 a.m., the drug must have entered his system. The theory that it was accidental was firmly rejected. Medical science left no room for doubt. Accidental ingestion was impossible. This was not mere speculation. It was grounded in rigorous, proven science. The experts had years of training and knowledge beyond anyone present. Their conclusions were backed by hard scientific data, not assumptions. They detailed how medications release active ingredients over time following predictable patterns. A pill's milligrams peak at specific intervals governed by time-release codings, documented extensively in medical literature. This was indisputable scientific fact. Amber's story simply did not align with this data. The claim that Damien found the pill in the couch cushion before bed was dismissed. The inconsistencies left no doubt about the implausibility of her explanation. Amber acknowledged the medical evidence but struggled to reconcile it with her own narrative. She was reminded that no one could refute the science behind the drug's presence in Damien's system. When pressed again, Amber admitted ignorance, unable to explain how the substance arrived there. Her only supposition was that someone must have put it there, yet she hesitated, unable to accuse anyone directly. She expressed disbelief that anyone would intentionally endanger her child. The investigators clarified that no one was accusing her or Scott of deliberate harm. The suggestion was that the contamination might have been accidental. However, this theory was contradicted by the positive test results found in Amber's 2-year-old daughter, Angelina, the very next day. Amber was at a loss, unable to explain this alarming finding. She conceded the odds of such contamination were astronomical, nearly impossible. The focus turned back to Amber and Scott as the only plausible sources. They acknowledged that Damien might have been a difficult child to care for. Amber vehemently denied this, insisting Damien was in fact the easiest baby she had ever cared for. She described him as calm and content, a baby who neither fussed nor whined, the perfect child in her eyes. Amber's explanations fell short, stirring more questions than answers. She confessed to a desperate wish to understand the why behind the tragedy. Haunted daily by the unknown, she struggled to grasp how it all happened. Her only hope was to uncover the truth, the missing piece she yearned to know. Suspicion arose. Could Scott have been the source of the harmful substance? Amber stood firm, denying any possibility that Scott would harm Damien, refusing to make excuses. Her denial was clear. She insisted she had given Damien nothing. Yet investigators pressed. Someone must have administered the substance. If neither Amber nor Scott was responsible, the question remained who was. The answer eluded everyone, deepening the mystery and Amber's torment. More than anyone, Amber longed to understand what had befallen her baby. But the investigators insisted the truth was already within reach. They claimed to have the answers, yet Amber clung to the need to know who was truly responsible. When pressed, she challenged, if not her, then who else could it have been? Her faith in Scott's innocence remained unshaken. When asked for proof, Amber simply asserted her belief. Yet months earlier she had admitted Scott was frequently intoxicated. The investigators seized on this contradiction. Scott Ferrari's name was invoked as a potential risk. Amber herself had said the medications had to be locked away. She warned Scott would steal pills, but only for himself, not to harm anyone else. The theory emerged that Scott's actions, though not malicious, might have caused harm. It was suggested that an accident could explain the tragedy. Perhaps Damien was irritable. Maybe Scott tried to soothe him with something to calm or lull him to sleep. The idea was that Scott was aware Damien cried, though it was rare. Damien was known as an exceptionally quiet baby. Everyone agreed on that. He hardly ever cried. Never, not even that night, nor the night before. He was safe, but nothing more, Amber speculated. Maybe Scott gave Damien something to help him sleep, though she admitted ignorance. The truth was that the substance entered Damien's system somehow, but the exact method remained unknown. Experts confirmed the toxic levels and pinpointed the time frame in which those levels would reach a child Damien's size. The crucial question lingered. How did the poison enter the child's body? No one had yet answered that. But someone knew the truth. Damien hadn't simply found the pills on the couch cushions, nor on the floor. Amber admitted uncertainty, asking what others thought. Her only conclusion was that Scott must have discovered something that was all she could fathom. She clung to that idea. But the investigation revealed deception. Amber had concealed the truth and lied. She was caught in the detective's relentless questioning. Her child had tested positive upon arrival at the emergency room, yet even confronted, she denied everything. Statements contradicted her earlier claims, exposing inconsistencies. The detectives asked about Scott's medications. They uncovered attempts to hide missed clinic visits. Amber had omitted prescribed drugs from her story. Amber insisted she was not obligated to disclose everything, yet she claimed honesty with the investigators. She was asked what she thought should happen next. Amber pleaded for honesty in return. She sought guidance on the outcome. When questioned, she confessed uncertainty, fearing she might lose her child. Amber's anguish was palpable. She was warned the possibility was real. She was challenged on whether she could regain custody of her children. The answer was bleak. Yet Amber insisted she cared deeply. Her desperation to avoid losing her other children was evident. She admitted not knowing the full truth despite the investigators' disbelief. As Damien's mother, she was expected to know more. Investigators pressed her on whether she questioned how the poison entered Damien's system. Amber admitted she asked herself the same question but had no answer. The detectives made their position clear. Only Amber or Scott could have introduced the substance. There was no other explanation. They urged Amber to grasp the gravity of their message. The truth was stark. The drug had not been found by accident. It had been deliberately administered with intent or negligence. Amber was urged to face the facts with maturity and honesty. The evidence was concrete, documented, impossible to refute. These were real facts, not guesses. They insisted Amber accept that Damien's poisoning was no accident. The toxicology levels made accidental exposure impossible. Amber was told she owed Damien the truth. She maintained if she knew anything, she would reveal it. She claimed transparency, denying any intent to hide facts. Yet the investigators remained skeptical. They reminded her of prior lies, casting doubt on her credibility. Doubt hung heavy in the air as Amber resisted revealing the full truth. She challenged the notion that past dangers should now compel honesty. Yet she insisted she sought to be truthful with everyone involved. But the interrogation pressed on, accusing her of withholding facts. Amber fervently claimed complete honesty regarding Damien's life. Swearing on Damien's life itself, she maintained her account was truthful. She confessed ignorance beyond what she had already shared. Her testimony was limited to her perceptions of the events. Still, the question lingered: why withhold details now? Specifically, who prepared the fatal bottle that night? Amber's memory failed her. She could not recall. She explained that feeding duties were shared, never left to one alone. Whether it was morning or night, the responsibility alternated unpredictably. Her uncertainty was palpable. Then came the troubling discovery: drugs found in Angelina's system. Amber admitted ignorance, suggesting the drugs were found lying around. She recalled finding them hidden in couch cushions. Investigators pressed as a mother. How could she remain so unaware of such dangers? The silence was unsettling. Amber's lack of alarm raised further suspicion. The investigators expressed disbelief at her detachment, questioning how she could be so disconnected from her children's lives. In response, Amber insisted she had been deeply involved. Yet the question remained: how did the drugs enter her daughter's system? Amber could not provide an answer, lamenting that if she knew, she hoped she would remember. The floor then turned to Scott, who was asked to recount the night's harrowing events. He described being in the bedroom watching television when Amber entered, cradling Damien, declaring he was not breathing. Without hesitation, Scott launched into CPR as Amber dialed 911. He persisted with resuscitation efforts until authorities arrived. Scott recalled the horrifying sight of a thick black substance oozing from Damien's nose and mouth during CPR. Attention then shifted to his nutrition. He was fed a soy-based formula similar to Ensure around 4 times daily. Alongside formula, Damien was beginning to eat regular food. However, he was starting to refuse solids, signaling nutritional challenges. He required all calories and nutrients he could get. Present at the home during the incident were Amber, Scott, and their 2 daughters. Their son was at school at the time. Investigators probed whether Damien could have ingested chemicals or medications. The parents claimed vigilance, insisting nothing harmful should have reached him. Medical findings revealed a tragic truth, confirming the grim reality of Damien's death. Doctors reported Damien arrived at the hospital in full cardiac arrest, his condition dire from the outset. Toxicology revealed opioids in his urine. Shockingly, the same substances appeared in Angelina's system. The investigation uncovered a disturbing practice. The parents had been administering oxycodone and other prescribed opioids to their children. The motive was chilling to sedate the children for easier management. A toxic dose of approximately 460 milligrams of oxycodone was found in Damien's bloodstream. Oxymorphone levels were also alarmingly high in his urine. Doctors concluded Damien's death was caused by cardiopulmonary arrest, complicated by pneumonia, all secondary to oxycodone intoxication. As a result, all the children were removed from the home to ensure their safety. Further toxicology confirmed Angelina had both benzodiazepines and oxycodone in her system. Scott, responsible for administering these drugs, received a 2-year sentence. Amber was sentenced to 5 years for her role, a combined 7-year sentence that many found shockingly lenient given the gravity of the tragedy. The case left a haunting question: how could such harm come from those sworn to protect their own children? The chilling aftermath lingered long after the courtroom emptied. The community was left grappling with the devastating consequences of parental neglect and abuse. This grim story stands as a stark reminder of the deadly risks hidden behind closed doors. The sentences served as a somber closure to a tragic chapter, yet the pain and questions continue to echo. One viewer remarked on the brevity of the prison terms, inviting others to reflect and share their thoughts on this haunting case.